Welcome back to the Prolific Author Podcast. How is everyone doing today? I hope you've had a great week of writing. Today I have a really fun interview with author Johnny Worthen. I have known Johnny for a long time. He is based out of Utah, just like I am. He is an award-winning author. He writes several genres and used to be the president of the League of Utah Writers, which is kind of our resident writing organization here. And he and I actually used to operate out of the same publisher years ago before they closed their doors. So Johnny's been doing this for a long time. He's got a lot of experience. And what I love about him is that he has so much fun writing and he just owns his author career. He's always looking to learn more and figure out the next thing. And I just think he's a really good example of a career author. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear from him. He's got some great stories and some great, just gems, experiences, and advice for everybody. Before we do that, I just want to let you know that the doors to my author course will be open in mid-June. I am probably going to do a 5-day free Get Your Book Outlined challenge just leading up to that. So I don't have a link to sign up for that yet, but I will have one probably next week. All right, so it's coming up. It's pretty quick, and I'm really, really excited to open the doors to that. I just want to kind of give you a heads up so that you're looking forward to it in mid-June. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Prolific Author Podcast. Let's face it, readers read fiction to feel emotion and be transported and transformed. In this ongoing digital revolution, where online marketing is always in flux, the only way to create a sustainable author business and live off your royalties is to write transformational stories, market at every stage of the author journey, and cultivate a loyal audience of readers. Fortunately, there's never been more opportunity to make a living as a fiction author. Hi, I'm Liesl Hill, USA Today bestselling author and story clarity coach. When I'm not dictating my own stories about dragons, serial killers, and dystopian worlds, I help other authors write their own transformational fiction, position them as bestsellers, and market them like pros. Join me on the podcast where I give writing tips, marketing how-tos, story advice, and interviews with other authors who are in the trenches just like you and making it work. We are prolific authors. All right, so we are here today with author Johnny Worthen. Johnny writes lots of books, and he and I actually used to be in the same publishing company before it closed its doors. So we've known each other for a long time. How are you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing well.
Good, good. Why don't you start out by telling everyone who you are and what you write?
All right. My name is Johnny Worthen. I'm an alcoholic. No, let's see. Okay, I'm an author. Let's see. I'm a Utah Writer of the Year. I'm the past president of the League of Utah Writers. I teach writing at the University of Utah, lifelong learning. I am 9 years into my 10-year plan to be an overnight success in this writing business. I have written 20 novels. Half of those have seen paper. I'm started traditionally published with Liesl, and we moved. And when I got my rights back from some of that, I've moved into hybrid just recently, so I've done that. I've read multiple genres. I debuted in horror. My bestseller was a young adult paranormal character study, the Unseen series. My debut is Beatrice L.A. I thought it was a love story, but it turns out it was a horror. So seriously, it was published by a horror press who I work for now. I am actually an acquisitions editor for Omnium Gatherer Medium in a dark fiction press out of California. Oh. And I do edits for them and have my own slush pile now, if you can believe it. Anyway, so I also write my book, The Finger Trap, won Diamond Quill for Best Book of the Year. That's a contemporary mystery set in Utah. The fourth novel in that series comes out June 15th, 2020. Nice. So that's right there, 3 different genres. That's a comedy mystery. I have a straight up political mystery called The Brand Man that's in print. I have a literary horror called What a Mortal Hand that's in print. And the big deal is, well, they're all big deals, frankly. All these are wonderful. Come November, my science fiction epic trilogy, Coronom, the first book of Kings, Queens, and Colonies, is released by Flame Tree Press, distributed by Simon & Schuster. So wow. I've hit big 5 come November.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, I know. I get launched in London and New York. It's going to be so cool. I just finished the edits. I love this book so much. I love all my books. Love all my books. Anyway, so that's what I'm writing. That's what I write. Yeah, I'm the idiot that quit his day job to start writing. But I could. So don't recommend this. Don't do this at home, people.
So can you talk a little bit about like how the experience is different when you're doing self-publishing versus, you've done the hybrid thing, so self-publishing versus traditional?
It's a well, okay. I had a real I don't want to say blind spot. Let's just call it prejudice against self-publishing for the longest time. And that came because, it's easy to, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of junk out there. I say it's never been easier to be published, but it's never been harder to be read. And I always leaned toward traditional publishing because, well, among other reasons, I'm a lazy man, but also because I always thought there was more fame in that. You're either in it for the fame or the money, I suppose. They say if you want fame, go traditional. If you want money, go self-pub, go indie. Well, anyway, that's fine, Danny. But mostly I want to be read. I want to be read. I don't care, read. So, right. What happened is I was first kind of slipped into this on accident with Jollyfish. When Jollyfish was acquired by Flux, they were going to grandfather the entire catalog. Now with Jollyfish at the time, I had my Unseen series, of which 3 books, all 3 in this trilogy had been released. That's Eleanor, my bestseller. Won Gold Quill for Best Young Adult of the Year. That was it. And let's see, it was Eleanor, Celeste, and David, and those were doing well. And I just launched The Finger Trap, the book that won the big award. And no sooner had it won the award than we heard that Jollyfish was folding. So anyway, they were going to grandfather them all in, but they were not going to promise they would publish the rest in the series of my adult mysteries. At this point, I had several written, and I couldn't let this die. So my agent got the rights back, and we started shopping it. Oh, that was hard. That was difficult. It never caught. A lot of there's so many different gatekeepers out there. It is so hard to break into here, even if you have books out there and I was trusted. But some of the things working against me is the book had already existed, and they look at the book and said, "Oh, it didn't sell very well. It was only on the market for like 42 days." So that was a problem. So anyway, ultimately, in order to keep the series alive, I had to go indie. So I set it up, and that allowed me to bring out that one again, which was nice. Actually gave me a chance to correct some of the mistakes. There were 2. And then I brought out Thicker Than Water, which I think is just a gem of a piece. The book, I remember Orson Scott Card saying he wrote Ender's Game in order to get Speaker for the Dead. He wrote that one book for the other one. And that's how I think about, I actually wrote The Finger Trap so somebody would notice Eleanor, but The Finger Trap was so much fun. And then Thicker Than Water came out, and that is such a good book. I read that and I'm just amazed at the construction of that. Anyway, so then I had these others, and I just kept going with it, and I'm doing pretty okay with it. And then just out of nowhere, earlier this year, I got a letter from Jollyfish saying, well, they're going to now out of print the Unseen series. And I said, that's weird. I'm getting royalties on those. Said, well, okay, we're just going to out of print the paper. Wow, that's like a kick. All right. Now, at this point, I've been in this business long enough to know that ebooks are kind of important. Right. So they would give me the rights back to something I couldn't really sell and keep the ebooks. And so luckily the Jollyfish contract that they were still working under pretty much said all or nothing. So I got the rights back for that. And they gave me enough headway that I think it was out of print for like 22 hours. So that was neat. So I got those back and running. And so that, and that's where I'm at. So at this point, all the books the 2 series that I've been indie publishing were all originally traditionally published, but the rights have reverted. And so in order to keep them in print in any fashion, I have to. So I got forced into it. However, it's been kind of a good experience all told. I've made some money. It's kind of nice. And I'm in control of my own marketing. I can take control. I still really love the traditional route, and hope that and really believe that Coronam's going to be just a marvelous experience, because first of all, it's science fiction, it's cool. Right. And I always struggle because I have to reinvent my genre, my audience, because I write so many genres. I should have done a pen name, but like I said, I'm a lazy man. But it's been a good experience. I'm trying to learn the marketing ins and outs of it. I've had a lot of great tutors who are very helpful. So I'm actually so far so good. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So do you find that you do make more money on indie, or is it about the same? You do?
Yeah, I have to say I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I do, definitely.
Interesting.
Because, I'm not cutting it up. And then on top of that, I can actually market the darn thing. It's I
Right.
can put my attention to it. But also this, yeah, I mean, I get a larger royalty, I get to move it, I get to action it, I get to promote it. And if promoting for a publisher, you kind of, you're promoting full cost for 15% if you're lucky,
Right.
So unless you're working with big numbers and you're being released by Simon and Schuster and Flame Tree Press, which is a fantastic press, it's questionable. So I don't know. I'm still got a couple of books out that I'm marketing, that I'm shopping around. Some young adult that I thought would just go nuts by now, but haven't caught yet. I think people hate me now. Anyway, I've got that, and I even have an adult crime thriller I'm shopping, but I'm not really that anxious about them anymore because I have a route and I can bring them to life, because that's really what I'm in the business for, is to be read more than, like I said, if I needed the money, I wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know that it's really interesting to get people who are doing both and kind of get the contrast between the two. And I think you just have to know what you want. I mean, people say it's a good thing to go hybrid, but which I think it is, but you also have to just know what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if I'd love to be in that ivory tower and you say, oh yeah, I published my first book and won a Pulitzer and I'm set for life. No, Pulitzers actually don't make you set for life.
Right.
But yeah, it's if you want to keep it going, it's almost required these days. It's like still using a fax machine in the age of email. So you got to follow along with it. So it's been very a grand learning experience, if nothing else. But it's been much more than that, because it does allow me to have so much control over my career and my books, which is hard, because like I said, I'm a lazy man. I don't like putting all this time in to marketing. But then again, Midlist is the same way. There's no guarantee, or small press is the same way. Small press is 100% this. You've been there.
Yes.
You know what we're talking about. Yeah, we got nowhere to go on that if we don't do it ourselves. I mean, they make a little push and they keep it around, and you don't have to worry about it. But you should worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of making me a more well-rounded modern author.
Right.
I've some of my heroes did the same thing. Twain. I think Huckleberry Finn was self-published.
Mm-hmm.
You knew, and now you do.
Yeah.
But it's so it's an experience. It's definitely the business side of it, which is kind of not the sexy side, but it can be, because it feels like there's a different camaraderie out there. It is a slugfest. There are a lot of us out there.
Right.
Sometimes I wonder if there aren't more writers than readers these days. So I do my bit by reading as much as I can.
Right. Well, and I like that you talked about having a route to go, because I think that's really the kind of the secret behind it, is you have to test and experiment until you find something that works for your books. But once you do, you can repeat it, and so then it's not so difficult and it's not so daunting to get that marketing done.
I think you're right. It's also because I have a living series, the Tony Flanner series, The Finger Trap, the Thicker Than Water. The third book is called In the Wake of Captain Lord. And then the next one that's coming out in June is called The Counterfeit Connection. That's fun. That takes place in Utah, Sundance.
Nice.
Tony goes to the mall. It's fun. He's funny. He's full of sarcasm and bad language. It's hilarious. But anyway, since it's a living, thriving, growing series, it's dead if you don't do this. So I really got forced into it, and I'm glad I did, because it gives me so much control. But something like Eleanor, I don't know if Eleanor is ever going to get a fourth book. I love that series. The Unseen has won awards. It's got a Kirkus review. Library Journal, definitely my most recognized book by many people. However, it's kind of now just there, so I just want to keep it alive, want to keep it available.
Yeah.
So I get actually two sides of it. Keeping a series kind of I don't want to call it defunct, because it's still alive, new covers and things, but it's not growing, and a growing series. And it's so they're different animals as well, and finding new avenues and new audiences. I'm afraid, I had some success on Facebook and working on Amazon ads, and done a lot of promotions, which have really given steps up. But you never know, always trying to figure out the new thing.
Right. It is a lot to keep up on.
Yeah,
for sure. So tell me, how long have you been writing now?
Well, like I said, I'm 9 years into my 10-year plan. 2012 is when I looked at my situation and realized what all I ever wanted to be was a writer, and that wasn't there. I got a list of things I wanted to be, and my resume read as a list of things I wouldn't do again if under any circumstances. So help me God, hated all of it. I've always like Tony Flanner and my main character, I ping-ponged between jobs. I've never really had a single career that stood out. Jobs were jobs, and not necessarily.
Me too.
Not necessarily life choices, right? I mean,
right.
So what do you do? Well, I work in insurance, but that's not really who I am. Anyway. So anyway, after the last little kind of, it was kind of a disheartening moment. I have a master's degree in English and American studies and a bachelor's degree in English literary studies and a classics in Latin. So naturally I went into fast food. I owned a restaurant for a while. That was kind of rewarding, but very stressful, very stressful.
Right.
And then that was up in Oregon where I collected all my tie-dye. And then back in Utah, I followed the real estate bubble till it burst. And then I owned, believe it or not, a drug testing company. And that kind of sapped the soul out of me. So when that kind of went away, I just looked at it and said, I got a war chest. I'm going to try this. Mm-hmm. And I just did it. I jumped off the cliff and things have worked out for me, but I've been very fortunate in that. Probably too fortunate in some ways because I don't have the, I can pick and choose a lot more than I think a lot of authors can because, I'm independent at that point. That's not to say I don't want to be here because I still very much need to be read. I really love these books. So any bit of validation for any kind of writer, you can do it. So anyway, so I'd say I've been writing my whole life, which is years. And, but professionally, I'm now 9 years into it. My son's asked me what happens in 11 years. And I said, well, then I'll be 11 years into my 10-year plan to be an overnight success. I still produce. I've got countless short stories. I several, at least get a book out a year. One year I had 3 books come out, all different publishers.
Wow.
So you never know. So it's, if they're small presses, I'd like to get something bigger. So that's something else, by the way. As a hybrid author, I'm allowed to stoke my sales, which would look good for other people trying to buy my other books. Well, okay, you did all right with this book. Maybe you'll do all right with this one. So that's it. Because I think as soon as any of my books become a bestseller, all of them will be. Yeah. So that's where I'm going with that. So that's a second benefit, if you will, for the hybrid route. Definitely. And so, I've been doing this and I get involved and I like doing this. It's I've never had a job that paid less that I enjoyed but I enjoy it more than any other job I've ever had. This is a fantastic gig, right. Creativity, edits. I meet people. I learn so much, constantly challenging me. I love being a writer. Absolutely. I like being a writer. I love being an author too. Authors are neat. Cool. You meet some cool people. Hello, so, it's a gang. Not all of them are nice. I've met some jerks. Yeah. But most of them, we're all in this. We're all kind of just journeying together.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So why do you think that you feel so called to tell stories?
No, I don't know. I think we all emulate our heroes. We try to, they say that given a choice, you will dress the way you did when you were happiest. And looking at me, since I wear shorts and t-shirts and tie-dye. And so I really like the Dead shows and that's who I want to be. And that's how I feel comfortable. But I also was so moved by writing, by literature, by books, by the whole mystique, by the knowledge, I had my political and my artistic awakening in college. So those books just stay with me. And that's who I wanted to be. I want to be those people. I want to have that effect. I want to be that smart, that knowledge. I want to create those things. And so following in the footsteps of those heroes, whether it's, Hemingway, Faulkner, those are some of the greats, or Alice Walker, so many great authors. It just changed me. I just kind of started doing it. I always started writing a story. And then I was always writing something, always creating something, always had that voice and always kept it up. And I learned suddenly, I've forgotten at what point, that a lot of people don't know how to write. Everyone thinks they do, but they really don't.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to pay you for that. Anybody could write a paragraph. No, not really. Not really. And I'm horrified of that. But I wanted to be a hero. So, I wanted to be those people. I had this terrible, do you want to know how not to sell a book at FanX? Sure. Here's your pitch. All of my books can be taught in an English class. See, that's just it. I'm a multiple genre author, not because not because I fell in love with Tolkien, or I fell in love with Elmore Leonard, or I fell in love with
Right.
Jonathan Franz or something. But I follow a theme, right? My master's degree and my bachelor's degree were in literary criticism, for crying out loud. I mean, this is Derrida and Lacan. I deconstruct and I love it. Start with the text and you see all these different meanings of symbol and symbolized and sign and symbol. And you go deeper and you understand the greater thing. So the theme of it. So I was doing autopsies on things. It never even occurred to me, how was this written? It's what is it trying to say? And that has always stayed with me. And so when I write something, I start with the idea of what questions do I want to address? And then it forms around it. That's why it started with I wanted to explore the idea of love. And so, but the darker side, the jealousy side of it. And that's where Beatrice was born. And then with the Finger Trap, I was just experimenting with what a voice-driven thing could be, and actually autobiographing a bit and that one, until I realized Tony, the Finger Trap, is where I realized I want to do this. Because I'd actually, at that point, I already had books in the market, shopping them. But that's where I wanted to be. And I liked the experience. I liked losing myself in there. And then you have those moments that really make it worthwhile. Those moments when you write the end, which is unparalleled. Believe it or not, even saying, oh, I've sold a book, it's in print, I'm holding a copy. Those are wonderful. But never is there a rush as finishing a book, ever. It's a 2-day, my feet haven't touched the ground kind of high. And so that does it too.
Yeah.
You think also, in a way, I think it could be mortality as well. I want to scratch the wall, we're here for so short, but if I leave a few words behind, maybe somebody will read that. I'll have some impact, that something that I have learned can be carried on a bit. So I have that kind of, I don't know, narcissistic idea that somebody will want to read what I had to say, or that or that I can slip in these important ideas into an otherwise comic scene, or that I can, and like in What a Mortal Hand, I can explore the idea of God and see, the nature of renewal, Yeah, I know, right? That one's a strange one. Yeah, so I'm, it's a calling. Been a calling for me. Occasionally, I'll put myself in a position where I have to write something, but for the most part, I kind of just write what I want to, and then I shop it, which is not necessarily the way to do it. The authors the most successful authors I know have always, I got a 10-book deal with Random House. Oh yeah, what are you writing? They haven't told me yet. Wow. And I'm not making that up. That's the kind of thing that, at a certain level you get into, and then that kind of becomes a craft. And so I'm still glossy-eyed enough to be looking at this as an art. Right. So I write things that don't fit neatly into any genre. I write experimental, like I have a book called Things Bequeathed, which everybody wants to call a young adult, but I can't see it. First of all, it's got a 14-year-old protagonist, which should be a middle grade by definition, but it's not a middle grade. She, first of all, she goes through some serious things. It's my daddy issue book, I call it. And she goes through daddy issues, and she has a little demon friend that helps her. And it's got that kind of sensibility, but it's still got a lot of heavy stuff in it. Coming of age in a different way. And 14 is like, don't touch 14, supposedly. I didn't know. Huck Finn was 14. I thought I'd be okay. But no, that was a tough one. But that's hard to put in there, because in a way it's literary. I actually have to compare it more to I don't know, just so I've I don't know. To Kill a Mockingbird comes to mind, because I'm working with those kind of ideas. Okay. I do feel weird comparing myself to the greats, but Harper Lee really should talk to me. No, it's hard to do that, because I come from that angle. So I want to explore ideas. I want to say therapy and everything, but it's so rewarding. And sometimes I really, really connect with other people. I say authors bleed on paper and then try to sell the bandages, right?
I like that.
So sometimes I find people who need the bandage.
Yeah, for real. Sometimes the bandages can actually become pretty valuable and pretty lucrative down the road.
They can indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to hear your experiences. So how do you go about your writing? Tell me about your process, and how do you craft your plots and your characters and all of that.
Well, okay. Well, I took a few writing classes in college, and that's really where I did it. So after that, I went to the real world and I tried the job. I got I got a leap on the job experience. Anyway, but so when I approach writing now, um, there's always the germ of an idea, and most ideas germinate for about a year, 2 years. Taking notes, I keep a list of just concepts that I want to work on one day, and when I start actually writing it down, I try to have like I always, each project is different, of course, but I try to isolate what it is that I'm going to be writing about anyway. What a Mortal Hand, I knew I was going to go to task on some really heavy metaphysical stuff. I had originally envisioned it as a lighter book than it came out as, but at the end, I just lost, had a loss in the family, and it was very much affecting me. And it's just like, how do I get around this? Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. This doesn't make sense. So anyway, I started working on that, and then the pieces just started falling together. And ultimately, I realized I start with different pieces. I don't pants, so to speak. I don't do that. Okay. I always, at least, I try to know where I'm going to be, where I'm going to end. I always have an end out there, so I know where I'm going to begin. Beginnings, it'll generally speaking, beginnings kind of just bubble up for me a lot of the times, because it's just, the trick is holding back, not putting in, right? But I know where I'm trying to get to. I'm going to get to that moment. I want him to face this question. Sometimes I don't know necessarily which way he's going to jump, or the character's going to jump, but I know that is the moment I want to get to. And so the writing kind of goes from there. And then between here and there, I will imagine a series of scenes. I know a lot of people like the 7-point plot structure, the 12-point ziggurat, the 15-point save the cat, the 26.5 marathon. I don't know how long is a marathon. Anyway,
that's right.
So I don't do that, but I consider everything a 3-act structure, which is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and everything's in the middle. But I will create a series of scenes, and each scene should address either usually it's a thematic scene. I want to explore some element of choice. What a Mortal Hand, I was looking at the concepts of lies and good and evil, and how and those kind of things. So each scene would kind of have a level of that. And as he fell deeper and deeper into madness, some of the scenes would evolve, and I'd slide new scenes in between. So I'd start with a scene list, at least to what I consider 30% out. And then by the time I'm halfway through that, I'll have another bunch of scenes coming out after that. And then at some point, I just catch momentum, and the thing just comes out.
Right.
Other books, I've had some really, really tight, I experimented with this, really, really tight outlines. And I wrote it. But I tell you, that was hard writing, because I didn't enjoy the process as much when I was really following along. But the book that came out of it's extraordinary. And once I stepped away from it and came back to it, I loved it. I'm not going to tell you which one it was, because, but usually I work around with ideas, and I try to give myself enough moving pieces early that I always have some place to jump to. With Tony Flanner, I can just follow him where he wants to go. Once the characters are developed, by the way, this is something that I don't know. It's going to sound stupid here, but once the characters are developed, they kind of do their own thing in a lot of ways. If I'm ever stuck, I'll just put my characters in a room and let them talk, and they'll tell me where they need to go, what they need to do, what's happening. And that's the point I want to get to. Sometimes I got to rein them back. But for the most part, I can kind of listen, because there's still part of me that can go along with it. I try to, some things, since I am an American and I have been absorbing literary theory and story structure from my earliest breath. Hell, commercials have 3-act structures. It's just naturally comes out that way. An inciting incident I try to get to. When I'm writing mysteries, which I very much like, it's a much simpler process, because I just need to follow the clues myself. I know what clues need to be put in there, since I know who did it, and that is key. And I know how, kind of know where it's going to be. That allows me not to take too many missteps. When at times I have pantsed pretty heavily, and there's a lot of rewriting involved. And as I say, I'm a lazy man, so that's not so that's the process. But the biggest issue is not necessarily, it's lately anyway, is the pandemic's really taken a toll. I love that. You can use that. Taking a toll on my creativity time, right?
Okay.
Where you have to come into a quiet room or less noisy room and you write, and yet not having too much of that is just a drain on me. And it's been difficult for me to be very productive during the pandemic. I have been productive, but not what I used to. I usually try to get 3 books out a year. And this year, COVID, I think I got 1, not great. And for the first time in my life, I had a start that didn't finish. And I'm embarrassed about that. It was my 21st start. I had a rule that I finish what I start. So I started one of them and I realized, okay, I don't have this one. I know where I'm going. I know all the pieces. I just can't connect it. I suddenly lost interest in the story. And that's something that I've also kind of come to terms with is every process is different. I've noticed no two, you know that no 2 authors have the same path.
Right.
No 2 people have the same process, but I tell you, no 2 projects have the same process. Some books very much are get up every morning, write my words, and I try to write 1,666 words a day. That's the NaNoWriMo number. Right. I know I can hit that. I can do that. At least because I have proof I've done it. And then when I get going, it's 2,000-3,000. But so that's my goal. And yet each project is different. Some books would just come out. Some books I honestly just had to hold back. Other books pulling teeth for a while. And I don't know. It's tricky. The project I'm working on now is a horror. And it's I'm trying new things, which is helpful, but it's a lot of distractions have come up and dragged me down. However, I still find myself thinking of the book every day, working a little bit on it. So I have to say that it's still in progress, but I'm not hitting my words like I used to. So also I seem to work well in coffee shops, and I don't have coffee shops anymore. Those are my favorites. I don't know why.
Right.
Enough out of here. Like this nice quiet study. Can't get much done in here. Can't even edit in here.
Really?
Yeah. I just got through a major edit and I just did it on my laptop on the couch.
Oh, interesting.
The thing is, once you're focused, you're out of the space anyway. You're wherever you are in the story. Once you get into the groove. But boy, the quiet of the house is always something to do. So anyway, you keep pressing on. And I had there was a speaker that we had, crash on the name here. Tim Wagner, who wrote Writing in the Dark. He's a horror writer. Great book, by the way, Writing in the Dark. A few writers out there recommended. Anyway, one of the things I think he said was, it's okay to forgive you. It's okay not to write for a while. It's okay to take a rest. It's okay to forgive yourself. And all these things are so true because, think, I'm not producing enough. And that's a tricky thing because I was really holding myself up to a high standard. Once you quit your job, you got no excuse not to be productive. So I did that for 9 years, right? But now it's like it's a little harder because I don't have as much to say, or I'm afraid of repeating myself, or all the things that were really eating at me before I've kind of expressed. I had 20 books that needed to be written. I've written them. So now I'm kind of going back and picking up some of the things that I haven't necessarily I'm finding new things to write about, and it's not the same level of energy, if you will. Okay. I don't, because it's also easy to repeat yourself at this level of your career, right? Stephen King has written The Shining 3 times now. It just calls it different things. And I don't want to do that because I find myself creating a scene that said, gosh, this is familiar. Where I had the same scene over there. Oh yes, Tony did this in the Finger Trap. So anyway, I went on a tangent there, but mostly I try to keep track of my words per day. I try to know what I'm going to write each day. It's a good idea, if you can, to read what you wrote the day before to get yourself into the mood. Hopefully it's worth reading. And that always gives me a little bit of a confidence. If I can read what I wrote the day before and there was a good line in it, a good turn of phrase, that always gives me the confidence to move on and continue on with it. And then you write. I try not to do too much editing early on because sometimes I have been there, even though I have a plan, where things have changed later on. In one of my books, I knew how I had the ending wrong. I always saw this character as battling the villain in the rafters of a burning building, and that just made no sense. By the time I saw it about halfway through, said, that can't happen. This character does not work that way. This character works by lying, so she must lie. So anyway, okay, I'm tangenting again, but that's how I work. That's how I work.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I really liked a lot of what you said there. I mean, I'm actually kind of a hardcore outliner, and I teach outlining to people, but I also tell them, I don't know, I think there's this misconception among writers that if you outline, you have to stick to your outline. And I don't think that's true at all. I think the outline is a jumping off point. And like you said, you always want to have enough of an idea that you know where you're going so you don't get stalled. But if you have a moment of clarity or a light bulb moment, yeah, totally deviate from your outline if it's going to serve your story, you know?
Well, the thing is that an outline gets done. And that's one of the problems that I had with that story. I had to let go. I never had a solid enough outline. I had the first third of it. And then I thought that would take me. And that's how it's often worked before. But for this next project and the one I'm working on, I've done a lot more with that, because that at least gives me that I'm liking it better. Yeah. I honestly think if I've never was a whole pantser, but some of my best works have kind of come out that way. Some right. works have been more than others. But as I get older, as I write more, it's the way to do it. Keep teaching it. Yeah, that's the way to. I teach it too, and I just need to listen to. I give very good advice, but seldom take it. You know?
Do as I say and not as I do.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, the more authors I talk to, I think most people start out pantsing just because it's our first book. We don't know that much about writing, you know, and people who want to turn it into a business, at some point they realize you have to do some planning or you're not going to be able to make a living doing this. So again, it just depends on what exactly you're going for.
Yeah. Well, the business thing made sense, because I remember I was at a Comic-Con panel, and there was talking about pantsing and plotting, and one of the authors says I was a hardcore pantser my entire life. Then I got picked up by a publisher, and they wanted to see what my next book was about, and they wanted to see an outline by June. Boom. It said I couldn't. Then, you know, the rules have changed.
Right.
And so now there's no other way to do it. So yeah, whether it's a business or it's just a professional calling card, you have to do it at some point.
Right. Right. Well, and the other thing that I think is really funny, and I have no judgment about this, I just think that it's a funny thing that a lot of authors have, is that we have so much stubbornness about our own writing process. So there are so many people who are pantsers and just refuse to believe that they can do anything else. And, you know, if that's what lights them up and that's what they want to do, then by all means do that. But it's also not a matter of you can't do that. It's just that you don't want to for whatever reason, or you don't prefer that, or you don't like it. But it's possible to teach your brain to do anything. So I just always kind of have to laugh when people say, I'm a pantser, I don't work any other way, my brain doesn't work that way. And it's like, but you could probably make it work that way under the right circumstances. I'm just saying, you don't have to.
Oh, you can. And one of the things also is, as soon as you're aware of this and you start writing, you start reading other books, and you become aware of it. Right. You become aware. This guy is a pantser. Stephen King, pantser all over it. I love that book. The first third of that book I would put up with. Stephen King was, the first third of it is unbelievably great. Just some of the best writing I've read in my life, and I'm pretty well read. The middle is, the last is, oh goodness, what happened here? I mean, he begins with a creepy clown, and he ends with a spooky space spider. Make those two meet. Anyway, so that's, and I notice it in mysteries when the author doesn't know who did it early on, because I was asked to do a TED talk on this, and it got canceled because of the COVID, but I was asked what I was going to talk about. And pantsing versus plotting on a spiritual level. Okay. Hear me out. I didn't get a chance to give this. I'll give you my brief cut.
Yeah.
When I was writing What a Mortal Hand, and I was contemplating the idea of nature and God and life and all this, it occurred to me, because I'm in this dialogue, is God a pantser or a plotter? And if he's a pantser, what a horrible world. I'm sorry. That just seems terrible that he's making this up as he goes along. You want to think there's a reason for this character dying in the first act. You want to think that there's a reason, that all of it, if you just have to be alert enough, and eventually it'll all fall into place and it'll all make sense. Since I do tend to write mysteries, fair play mysteries, a lot of those, I've written more of those than anything. I'm very aware of that. And the red herrings have to be explained as much as the regular thing. And when you reach the end of a book that is done this way, that has been planned and all the pieces are connected, it is so much more rewarding. Right?
Yes.
And you can do that so much easier if you're plotting along.
Right.
And if you just make it up as you go along, well, okay, I'll introduce a character in the last act. Oh, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's when you get into like the Deus Ex Machina, like they obviously just came up with something. But I totally agree. And that's a good segue to the next thing I want to talk about, because I think when you plot, you make the story, like you said, more interconnected and more cohesive. And you can, the human brain is we're conditioned to look for patterns in
Yes.
anything. And so when a reader, I mean, most readers don't even pick them up consciously. It's a subconscious thing, but they get to the end of the story and they don't even know why. They just loved it and it just spoke to them. And it's because it was planned so well, and because the first chapter mirrored the last chapter, and there were so many, foreshadowings and symbolism and all this different stuff in it. And so, it's not really about whether we like to write that way. It's gonna connect with the reader that way much more deeply. And I know I've actually attended classes that you've done on symbolism and about using it purposely and using it a lot. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, it's the same ideas. But yeah, it's creating a satisfying connection. It's still the same thing. Since I do kind of come with I write from an idea standpoint. When I think writing to theme is a complete luxury. You don't have to. Every book will have one, and if it's there, it'll always be there in the background. Since I was trained to find them, I'm there. But when you're working with symbolism, I mean, everything is a symbol. It's communication, and I teach the reading-writing spectrum, reader-writer spectrum. So a writer creates something, and the reader brings something to it. It's never a one-way. You're never all the way there. The reader's got to bring something to the table, even if it's just knowledge of the language, right? But also that one word defines another. It's this group. So anyway, you want to let the reader get involved. The more the reader can get involved with your story, the more involvement they have, the more it'll mean to them. If you're filling it with adverbs and adjectives in every description possible, and you're not leaving the reader a lot of room to really imagine, to work with their brains, they might still have a good read and a good experience, but it's not going to stay with them. Now, that's kind of the mental margarita, or the Marvel movies, if you will. What was the second Avengers about? Anybody? Yeah, I don't know. But and then there's books and stories that actually that might be a little harder to get into, but stay with you anyway. But the idea of symbolism is that behind everything is a symbol, but there's resonance in those things, and if they can keep coming back, and it's that same kind of subconscious connection where they know the story is fulfilling and satisfying when they get to the end, because all the pieces were there to begin with. And even though they never consciously understand that they're reading a story about promises, for example, Blind Squirrels, about promises. Everything kind of echoes and comes off with that. And so the final twist makes sense because of that. And the symbol of the promise, be it a wedding ring promise that I might use in one scene, or the promise of a degree in another that never paid off, or the promise of I made a promise, a commitment to myself, I'm going to keep it, and how those different things happen. That's important. And you carry on an idea in every way you can. Since every line is a symbol of some kind, using other symbols and themes within your story are just required. And you tap into a reservoir of previously understood connections, whether it's sometimes the connections are built right within the books, like the Mockingjay in Hunger Games. So that's a symbol she creates, and it is a very effective, well-rounded, complete symbol that just looking at that one symbol and understanding where that bird came from, how it mated with another bird to become this resistance bird, tells you the entire history of that world. It is an extraordinary piece. And then again, you could have something like the plow in My Antonia, where it's a symbol of cutting the earth and new life and everything. And that kind of sums up the whole thing in one simple image. Then you could borrow symbols of somebody got their hair cut and could no longer be an effective fighter. You're going back to the Bible, and you bring this other information in there. So I'll make a joke, I play upon cultural literacy all the time, and that plays upon shared symbolism. Somebody finds, I found the one ring, give it to me, my precious. You make the connection. And what you've done is you've asked the reader to make that connection within their head. I know this sounds very basic, but it's not. You bring up a symbol or something, and you are playing on that. Not the word of playing on that. Trading, that's it. You are trading on their knowledge of certain things. So a road has a certain idea behind it. Rings are very, very powerful. Churches, graves, all these things they don't come unencumbered, and you can actually trade on that because you don't have enough words in the longest book to get all that information in there. So the reader's got to bring more. So you encourage them to bring their knowledge of the Bible, bring their knowledge of other things they've read. Jokes are really the same idea, but literary fiction's the same idea. If you have absolutely no idea about certain references, Moby Dick or something, the story shouldn't stop for you. You do get it. Do get that subtle connection with the author. Stephen King's telepathy, as he calls reading, the telepathy has happened, and the reader is more engaged. You have more of a connection and a better understanding of it. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I always look at Annihilation, a tough movie. If you've ever watched the science fiction with Natalie Portman, anyway, it was based on a book called Area X. Great movie, but it's very hard to get into. Yeah. But if you do work on it and you understand the symbolism of annihilation and all its different levels, particularly the psychological ones, and you understand and there's a very subtle scene in that book, in that movie, where we see the couple, and in a way the movie could be about a breaking up of the couple instead of aliens. It's about an affair and a breakup. But she's sitting there reading a book called The Eternal Life of Lax. I forgot the name. Anyway, it's what's the name of the book? I just read it. Anyway, it's a book about immortality in the soul and cells that don't have the marker to die. Henrietta Lacks, that's it. And these cells are still alive. And she died in the 50s, 40s. They're cancer cells and they're still used. But it's interesting because that actually is a symbol of the entire movie and a theme within it. And those kind of subtle things which go through it, if you know the book, it resonates. If you don't, the movie carries on a different thing. So there's a higher and a lower levels you can kind of get the perception of. I watched the movie a dozen times and I get something new out of it every time. That to me is great literature. Anyway, that's what I was talking about. So symbols, but as soon as I made that connection, I had one of those wonderful, satisfying aha moments, and that is what we want to get to. That's the end. That's the payoff. That's the laugh at the joke. A joke is ABC minus B. They enter, they figure out the missing part, fill it in themselves, and it gets a giggle. It's the same idea as symbols. So that's where I'm going with that. That's a long way to say what I'm talking about there. See, this is why I write multiple genres. How do you put this in one genre? Yeah, I write young adult character studies. I don't know. I do that. But move on to another question. That's probably too long. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean, though. I actually recently just did a little training on like epic one-liners that kind of follow the same, what you were just saying, like take something that they would have to have read the whole book or the whole series to understand and make the connection, because that's what drives the aha moment and can create a lot of satisfaction, is when they make those connections. So I think that takes a lot of skill as a writer to do. I don't think most first-time writers even think about that, but as you get going along, that's how you create better fiction.
I think it's training the mind. As soon as you're in there and start doing a lot of it, it kind of just becomes organic. In my book, Cornum, for example, the idea behind that is, there are a couple things, usually it's a bunch of things happen at once. I had just read the story of Roanoke, the lost colony of Virginia, right? And I didn't like the ending. I didn't like how that one ended. I love the background stuff. Lee Miller wrote a fantastic book about it, and I loved that. And then I looked at that moment in history around then and realized this was the birth of a lot of our troubles. This was the beginning of the slave trade. This was the beginning of colonialism. A lot of bad things began in the 16th century. So I started thinking about working on that. And I said, well, what else? What other options are there? What's your utopia, Johnny? I thought about it. I don't have a utopia. I couldn't think of the perfect life. But you know what I did get? A better one. I could at least visualize a little better than what we had now. Okay, so that then becomes my end point. So then I started thinking, and all these different pieces and all these different characters are swimming in my head, and I know what I want to talk about. And it starts and when you write fantasy or speculative fiction, you can take honest, real events like Roanoke, like the Spanish Armada, and you can twist them away in a way to revisualize them to fit your agenda. Now, historians do this too. They just do it sneakier. So I didn't. I set it in the future, 3000, year 3500, way in the future. Earth is gone. We're around new planets. And the symbols are still there. And the ideas are still there. And I explore these ideas. And I didn't necessarily come up with each and every connection of this and that, but they organically came through. Once the project took root, I could kind of see what needed to have happen here. Since I was working in such epic scales, I could bring up all those things, from the slave trade to the role of the church, to the role of kings, to the role of the peasants. All of this major turmoil I could then expand upon. I let myself have, I don't know, 15 point of view characters in that book, something along those lines. But it was necessary. And the whole thing carries on with a series of scenes. And so, like, there's when you couldn't put on a 7-point plot structure. You just couldn't. I forgot where I'm going with this, but mostly I'm just saying that this became organic, the symbolism, to understand that you need to have this, because in the back of your brain, you're working with archetypes anyway. Elizabeth Gilbert, I think that's Elizabeth Gilbert. Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, has a fantastic book called Big Magic. Anyway, she also has, if those of you don't want to go read that, go look at her TED Talk. And if I can paraphrase that, she talks about writing. And in it, she talks about one of the things that I remember that very distinctly is the Romans didn't put their names on their works because it was a genius in the form of another entity. They were just a conduit. They didn't claim ownership over this because they were spoken to by an alternative force. Okay. The muse, if you will.
Right.
And it sounds like such crap, but it's not. There comes a moment where I'm taking dictation, right? And that's where you want to get to, in my opinion. And if you can get that, and that's my best books have always had that, where there's just moments where it's just flowing on its own, where an idea has come through and it is it almost comes ready built. I just have to assemble it. It comes in all pieces, I just have to assemble it. And that's the idea, is that you can. And that's part of the reasons why sometimes I think I waited too long to write this one story and the muse left and found somebody else. Probably, I don't know, Dan Wells, maybe. I don't know.
So if he comes out with that story next year, you'll know what happened.
Mine.
Oh, that's awesome. So tell me this then. If you could take a 6-hour plane ride sitting next to any author, living or dead, who would it be?
I thought about that. Hunter S. Thompson at his peak. The plane would have to land before we got anywhere, but that would be the trip to take. If you don't know Hunter S. Thompson, he wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Fear and Loathing in the Kentucky Derby. He was a social critic and a crazy man during the 60s and 70s. I think he'd be the most interesting. I mean, I think Hemingway could be a schmuck. I met Tim Dorsey, so he was high on the list, and I met Tim, so that's cool. Elmore Leonard, I would have liked to talk to, and Ursula K. Le Guin. I have nothing but more respect. Every time I learn more about her, I have more and more respect for her. As a matter of fact, she gets a dedication for Kings and Queens. I dedicate it to Lee Miller, Naomi Klein, and Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula did that famous. Well, anyway, she's just great. If I don't know Ursula K. Le Guin, look into her. She's just, if nothing else, she's at least a good example of how you can try to use your art for good, if you will, of creating particularly speculative fiction. That's why I dedicated the book, because I'm trying to envision a better way. So I don't know if anybody's going to read this book and says, "Oh, I have learned the evil of my ways. I am going not to attack this island." No, it's not the way it works. But it's a good ride. So, but anyway, Hunter S. Thompson would be fun. I probably couldn't keep up with him, and his smoking would get a little old after a while, and his slurring would be bad. But man, I at least have a story. I'd have such.
Yeah.
The time I spent 6 hours, Hunter S. Thompson, and we had to land in Guam. All right.
Hey, the landing would be half the story right there.
If you know Hunter, he's great. He's dead though. Have you noticed how many authors didn't make it to old age?
Yeah,
he's one of them. I mean, all of them. We got Virginia Woolf, Ernest Hemingway. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald drank himself to death.
Yeah.
Stephen King avoided Stephen King's doing all right, but he got hit by a truck.
Yeah. He sort of cheated death, but it kind of came for him, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm curious who you'd spend that plane ride with.
Oh yeah, there are so many. One would definitely be Robert Jordan because he has influenced me so much. But I could name 10 or 15 off. I would love to talk to. Well, let's put it this way: I would love to talk to the Telltale Heart.
Which one?
The Telltale Heart.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, just to ask him like how he died. Like, what the heck happened, dude? I just want to know.
Yeah, Eep would be good. Eep, I call him Eep. We're like this. I love Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah, he'd be good. I consider him the greatest American author. He invented two genres,
Right.
Detective mystery and horror as we know it today.
Yeah. And you just kind of wonder like what his personality was like, like how did he come across in a conversation?
I know, yeah. I think he was probably, I understand the rumor is he froze to death drunk. Somebody else said he was beat up by canvassers trying to get his votes. I don't know. What was the story of that John Cusack movie? How did he die in that one? He played Edgar Allan Poe.
I think he was poisoned in that. If I watched it, but I kind of don't remember what happened at the end of it. But yeah, it's just like the famous mystery around his death,
Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe would be awesome. That would be pretty good.
Awesome.
I mean, it's the whole process is strange. My last Tony Flanner, The Counterfeit Connection, which comes out in June. Yes, I'm pitching it. I'm plugging it.
Go for it.
The theme of that is counterfeiting and imposter syndrome. Something that a lot of creatives know about. And
all creatives, I think. Yeah.
so that was what I was wrestling with when I wrote that book. And so every mystery, every angle has to do with counterfeits, whether it's counterfeit this or it's counterfeit people, counterfeit ideas, why you see yourself. And I like that book because when I read, reading it again, having it out there, I realized that Tony never actually solves his own counterfeit. He gets a good moment. He comes out of it for a while, but it's only for a while, right? But that's part of it. And I hate it. Do you ever get to thinking that I wonder if all my best work is behind me? I'll never write anything as good as that again. And then you get some validation, like big release. You go, oh my God, I still have it, And that's part of it. It's just validation,
Right.
I think that's what being an indie author offers more of, because if you're chasing it, the gatekeepers, it has nothing to do with your writing. Well, something to do with your writing, but it really has more to do with the market.
Right.
They won't, or they had a bad bagel that morning and they're not into the slush pile.
Right.
And the word arbitrary is more powerful, is better than subjective. It's arbitrary. And if you write something weird, how do you ever get validation if you write something unusual?
Right.
Frank Herbert and Dune. Do you know the story of that?
Yeah. Do you mean how he wrote it?
No. Yeah. Who published it?
No, I don't.
He couldn't get anything. Chilton published it the first time. Chilton is famous for publishing How to Fix Your Mustang. They wrote car repair books. They stepped out of their comfort zone to do a science fiction because they liked it. And he couldn't get arrested in New York.
Yeah.
The Hunt for Red October. The Navy published that. Nobody else would touch it. So, and that, at least now we have the options like The Martian can come out or Ready Player One. This is what indie does. You at least get the validation in the readers and you get something back. But that's why it is easy to be published now. And if you get any validation on that, so much the better. I mean, it would be nice if, maybe eventually this book will catch on. Maybe it won't. I don't know. Maybe it's ahead of its time. Maybe it's past its time. I don't know. Still people who read it, but not enough because the new hotness is werewolves with one ear, and that's what's selling at the moment.
Right.
So anyway, indie offers that. I don't know how we got on that, but I know many of your listeners are indie. There's a reason why a lot of really good authors, every author does this eventually. These gatekeepers are not infallible.
Right. I agree. And yeah, it just gives everyone, like you said, there was a time when if you wrote something that was outside the norm, you had almost no chance of getting it really seen. And now you have an audience for anything. absolutely anything you write. And that's nice, to know. And I also think that even if someone's not into it now, I mean, it's very common where someone will write something and maybe it doesn't take off when you launch it, but 5 years down the road, suddenly it will, because maybe that's become more of a trend by then, or you know what I mean? That sort of thing. So
yeah, you can keep writing it. You can keep going with it. It's I'm just trying to figure out all the ins and outs of it still, because it seems it's actually kind of exciting. It does give me a distraction when I can't write otherwise. I can say, I'm still being a writer. Look at me. I'm doing research.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
well, being a writer gives you instant authority to do anything you want.
I know, right?
All you have to do is say, oh, I'm writing a book on this. And people are like, oh yeah, okay, carry on.
Yes. This plutonium is all about research.
Right.
Really, officer, I have no idea what happened. How'd that get in my browser history? No idea.
Don't look at an author's browser history. We're all going to end up on FBI watch lists.
I'm sure we already are. All of us. I mean, it's I just think it's we love these things. I mean, it was writing as a spec. As we are, we're not one of these 10 books. We'll tell you what to write later. We're writing on spec. Everything is on spec. We write it and hope we can sell it later. So you got to love it. And if it doesn't get picked up, what are you going to do? You're just going to, Virginia Woolf said there's nothing sadder than a pile of unpublished manuscripts. Damn right there isn't. Look at that. Oh, look at all this, I've written 20 books, only 10 have seen paper. Those are fun. I love that.
What?
I wrote a young adult with a male protagonist. That's been a hard sell. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I didn't make it. I don't know.
Well, and that's the kind of thing though that you probably should indie publish, because when I first got started, one of the first books I wrote was a historical romance sort of a thing, and I wrote both from the female and the male perspective. Both. Yeah. And everywhere that I shopped it, that was traditional, they refused to publish it because part of it was from the male perspective. But in indie, that's very common. There's lots of romance that are written both from the male and the female. So your YA with the male, I bet there are other YAs with male protagonists out there, and you could self-publish that and find an audience.
So I'm definitely, it's taken a lot of the pressure off, knowing you have this other effective avenue.
Right.
So yeah, I need to learn a lot more. I still feel like I'm a baby in the woods. I've only been doing it a year.
Yeah.
But I'm learning, and it's publishing is not what it used to be. It's kind of interesting. No. You think you have to have the paperback. You really don't.
Yeah. They always tell you should, you quote unquote should have it available, but yeah, most people, they're not selling volume in paperbacks anymore. So
no, that's a good part. I've got paper. Kings, Queens and Colonies, the one in November. I get a hardcover for that, but like I say, that's Simon & Schuster. But these other books, I have them out there. I spend all the time. I lay them out. I love them. I'm good at this kind of thing. But I'll sell 100 ebooks for each paperback.
Right.
And
Well, where can people find all of your books?
Well, I'm on Amazon, all of them. JohnnyWorthen.com, JohnnyWorthen.com. I'm also with Johnny at JohnnyWorthen.com. There I have an events page. You can see what I'm doing. The classes I'm teaching up at the U, open to everyone, no grades, just learning. League events, conventions. I'm going to Idaho, going to Vegas. Quills is coming up in August. My book's coming out, and Amazon. So JohnnyWorthen.com, JohnnyWorthen.com. Don't know what else to say. I do my own website because I'm a lazy man and people disappoint you. Anyway, that's it. I don't know. Just getting on as I can, right?
Well, hey, if you've got 20 books written, I don't think that you qualify as a lazy writer anyway. You've got lots of writing, lots of stuff doing. Well,
thank you. I appreciate that. You always hold yourself to a higher standard than you should.
Yeah.
I suck. I'm a total. Oh, I got lucky. Imposter syndrome never goes away. I heard an author tell me about that once. Says that you just level up. You get a New York Times bestseller. It doesn't mean you're over it. It means you've just leveled up. You've got a new level of imposter syndrome. I thought that was just exquisite. That was an exquisite description.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been a really fun conversation.
Me again. Before you go, if you found value in this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review. Reviews are the best way to show your appreciation and help others find this podcast. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your favorite social media network, and tag me at LK Hill Books. Remember, the world needs your stories. Only you can change someone's heart with your fire-breathing dragons, your mind-blowing mysteries, your epic romances, and your intense thrillers. So join the revolution and be a prolific author.